Welcome to Cybersmart's Chatterbox series for parents. I'm Kelly.
I'm Cara.
And I'm Gulsum. We've all been teachers in Australian schools and are now education advisors for the Cybersmart educational program.
Cybersmart Chatterbox has been designed to help parents help their children and whole families to find out how to be cybersmart and to use the internet safely. You can join the conversation and forum by following the link below. Well, I'll be the first to admit that talking about the online world is a challenge, simply because I know how much I love using it and how much I rely on it, and that it has essentially changed the way I organise and entertain myself.
I think as adults, though, we come with years of experience on how to navigate difficult social situations, and that's probably where the difference is, that adults have the ability to set limits, or most adults have the ability to set limits for ourselves and strike a balance with the online and offline use.
Definitely. The impact of what's going on developmentally for kids cannot be understated, because ultimately we know a lot of the behaviour that we see going on for kids is actually part and parcel of growing up. So things like risk-taking, seeking a sense of belonging, experimenting, testing boundaries. And when we talk about young people online, we're actually just simply talking about young people's behaviour, because ultimately the way that we hope they behave online is how we hope they will behave in the real world, with respect, with confidence, with mindfulness, with resilience.
And I guess just like in the real world, you learn these things from experience, your interactions, your successes and your failures.
And you don't stop kids learning to ride a bike because you think they're going to fall.
Correct. When you're talking about the online world, it's important to consider that exposure to online risk does not always translate to harm, that risky experiences can actually help develop coping strategies and resilience. And if you're going to limit experiences, you can actually increase a young person's vulnerability online.
But in saying that, you certainly wouldn't want a 6-year-old participating in the same online activities or seeing the same material as a 16-year-old. I think boundaries are important and kids like them, and in most cases, some kids need them.
Of course, and that's why it's so important to understand the age and stage of your child's growth and what you can expect them to be like, because then by understanding what's normal developmental behaviour, that'll actually help us to identify what's problematic behaviour, and that's for both the online and the offline world.
So one of the best things that parents can continue to do is monitor behaviour and allow age-appropriate freedoms and put the right steps in place to mitigate some of the challenges and issues.
That's right, because the technology and the social media sites are changing so quickly, but the reality is the ethics and the morals behind those sites remain the same. So what we need to do is just remember that good behaviour is good behaviour and respect is just respect. It's the same both online and offline.
You know what amazes me? How often are we now seeing your 1 and your 2-year-olds picking up smartphones and knowing how to scroll or tap in order to navigate it?
Oh, it's phenomenal. And if we consider that at that age and that stage of early childhood, say from birth to 6, this is where we're seeing really powerful parental modelling and influences coming into play. So your toddler becomes familiar with technology through the observation of others, through the verbal communication that is used around them, terms like uploads, downloads, Facebook, having their photo taken. It sparks curiosity simply because of how much time people spend with these devices.
So this would be the time as an adult to minimise things like texting at the dinner table if you don't want to set the trend down the track.
There's lots of things to be mindful of. I think we need to be aware that this is the time that a young person's digital footprint is first formed. We're the ones that are actually posting photographs of them online and essentially starting an online identity for them. And this happens through Facebook uploads and emailing, etc. It's also a time where there's potential for accidental exposure to inappropriate content. And if young people are left alone using devices, there's the potential that they may actually inadvertently move through to sites through hyperlinks that aren't appropriate for them.
And some of this stuff sometimes can be counteracted by making sure you know how to enable the safe search modes. And a lot of the media sites now have that. I know Google has it and YouTube has it.
Yeah, that's really handy because generally children accept media content just at face value. They don't have those critical thinking skills to be online alone and could easily be frightened by what they see. So that's pretty much the same as when the TV's on and you're selecting a movie. It's really just guided exposure.
I think where we have the most control as a parent is when children get to primary school age, because we're dealing with a group of kids that are actually by nature very positive. They've got an accepting nature, they're trusting, and they want to do the right thing. They're eager to behave well, but they're also curious and they're trusting. So this is the time that we can lay firm guidelines down and expectations of behaviour. It's also the time where we can set in place open lines of communication and conversation.
And I think that's really important. One of the things from research that we know is traditional bullying peaks in year 5 and then it repeats again in the transition into high school. So this is a time that parents must be really aware of what's happening, both in a traditional sense, face-to-face interactions with other kids, but also when they're online.
It's a time where they're testing their friendships, though, and they're testing the boundaries of trust. So a way to actually show your best friend that they are your best friend and they'll be your best friend forever is to perhaps share your password.
And it's interesting because when kids get into high school, they continue sharing their password, sometimes a little bit differently. When they have a new girlfriend or boyfriend, they'll share that password. Now, Cara, what are the kind of reasons kids continue to do the sharing?
I think at this age, teenagers are motivated by social interaction, whether it's positive or negative, and they're seeking a sense of belonging, they're seeking acceptance, and they're seeking inclusion. Peer groups are really important. They want to prove their worth and their loyalty. They're experimenting with romantic love and sexual love. They're actually pushing their family and their parents away, so they're seeking more privacy from their families, yet they're becoming so much more public with their friends and their peer groups because they're actually trying on personas and they're trying to find who they are. A big part of it is wanting to know if they're normal and if they fit.
So at this stage, even though teenagers may not be openly seeking it, I think there's a really high need for parents or mentors to come in at these ages. This is where, as parents, we may need to recognise that we aren't the role models they naturally come to speak to openly, but we do need to encourage it with someone, maybe even a friend or an auntie or some other trusted adult.
And are there really big differences in the way that boys and girls are using and interacting online?
I think in a very generalised way, we can see some key differences and some tendencies. I think by nature girls are more socially inclined on the internet, so they're the ones that are likely to be wanting to communicate with their friends. They're the ones setting up profile pages and sending pictures. They might be contacting strangers for validations, whereas your boys are more about distributing images, they're gaming a bit more, they're actually filming and uploading and viewing violence or risky type of videos.
I think this is definitely where good online practices at this age blend with what's important offline, and these are mainly resilience and confidence, having healthy respect for relationships, and most importantly, I think respect for self and respect for others.
And I think given the media saturation around our young people today, we need to be continually helping our kids, both younger and older, to actually read, to question and to understand the media that does saturate them.
That's right. And as parents, this is really overwhelming information to kind of think about when do I do what? At what different age and stage do I apply certain behaviours?
So as a parent then, what's the main pieces of advice I think that go across the age groups?
I think the whole way along you need to stay involved. You need to monitor your youngest child, keep the lines of communication open with your older children and teens. And this isn't a conversation that you have just once, but it's something that you build into everyday parenting. Reassure your children that you're there to support them, you're there to listen to things that may have arisen, and that you're not going to have a knee-jerk reaction and disconnect them from their online world if something's gone bad. It won't be your automatic response if a problem arises. And finally, just modelling positive online behaviour from the very start. Be aware of the kinds of signals you're sending your children about balancing your online and offline life.
Some really good tips there. For more information and ways to start these conversations with your kids, visit the Cybersmart website on www.cybersmart.gov.au.